Like many people, it would seem, I like to get part of my daily news intake through podcasts. Whether it's while out going on a walk or doing chores, it's multitasking at a level where even I can keep up. So I thought it might be fun to let you all in on my favorite podcasts on UK politics. If you're looking to get into UK politics or just want to widen your intake, well, I hope this video proves helpful. I'll take you through my favorite 12 podcasts on UK politics. Some are broad, some are niche, some are partisan, some are neutral. And this is a bit of a different type of video, so I'm interested to see how it's received and whether you all find it helpful. These podcasts are listed alphabetically, so this isn't a ranked video. Just because a podcast isn't on here also doesn't mean I think it's rubbish. I might not have heard of it, or I might just have left it out in favor of something else. And so without any further ado, let's get started with Coffee House Shots. Coffee House Shots is the podcast of the Conservative Party magazine, The Spectator. It's hosted on rotation by various Spectator writers, including James Heal, Isabel Hardman, and Tim Shipman, who I should note is also the author of a series of brilliant insider accounts of the past many years of government. The podcast is structured, as you'll see with a couple others on this list, as a short format briefing with a little analysis on the biggest story or two of the day. It comes out every single day and is roughly 15 minutes long. It is, just like its name suggests, a little shot of political news. It is, of course, conservative leaning, but not to the point where it becomes a problem for its trustworthiness. It's good journalism, and its close ties to the Conservative Party also mean it's often able to go more in depth on the inner workings of Badenoch's office and CCHQ. Let's now turn to Electoral Dysfunction. Electoral Dysfunction is one of the flagship Sky News podcasts on UK politics. It's hosted by political journalist Beth Rigby, alongside former Scottish Conservative Party leader Ruth Davidson and former Deputy and interim Labour Party leader Harriet Harman, who replaced Jess Phillips last year. The podcast takes the 3 or 4 biggest political stories of the week and explores them. The episodes last about 30 minutes and come out every Friday. The excellent aspect of this podcast is the sort of insider knowledge that comes along with both Davidson and Harman, who are clearly both very much still active operators in their respective parties. And they also make this a quite balanced podcast, though of course void of more radical voices on both sides. Aside from just being commentary, the podcast occasionally also premieres some of Rigby's journalistic work. Recently that included her headline-making interview with the then embattled Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner. Next on the list, we've got Holyrood Sources. The first of a trio of devolved nation podcasts is Shortbread Media's Holyrood Sources, which covers Scottish politics. It's hosted by politics presenter and radio host Callum MacDonald, former Chief of Staff to Alex Salmond, Jeff Aberdeen, and former Head of Communications for the Scottish Conservatives, Andy McKeever. The show takes the biggest stories in Scottish politics, both in Holyrood but also UK-wide politics that impact Scotland, and covers them in a weekly show every Wednesday, which lasts between 30 to 60 minutes. If you're interested in Scottish politics, especially going into the Scottish election next May, this is a really excellent way to start brushing up. Though, be warned, this podcast is made for people who are already quite invested in Scottish politics, so it can take a few episodes before you fully get into it. This isn't a ranked list, but if I had to rank, this is the podcast that would come in a close second place. I'll get to number 1 later. But first, next up, we've got How to Win an Election. How to Win an Election is a podcast put out by The Times. It's hosted by The Times journalist Hugo Rifkin, as well as prominent Conservative Party advisor Daniel Finkelstein, political advisor to Tony Blair, Sally Morgan, and advisor to Nick Clegg, Polly Mackenzie, which gives it perspectives from the Conservatives, Labour, and the Liberal Democrats. The podcast started in 2023 as a way to look at various aspects of politics and elections ahead of the 2024 general election, but it became quite successful and has continued post the election. Just a fun side note here, Morgan only came in recently. Before she joined the podcast, Peter Mendelsohn represented Labour on it. This was also the podcast where he said that Keir Starmer should lose a bit of weight, if anyone remembers that quite strange little news cycle last year. The podcast is structured around taking a big issue or two of the week and then getting insights from the hosts on how these things work behind the scenes and the sort of political considerations behind them. The podcast comes out every Thursday and lasts about 45 minutes. Let's now go to The New Statesman. The New Statesman is the podcast of the left-wing magazine of the same name. In some ways, this podcast is very similar to Coffee House Shots. Its episodes come out every single day, they last about half an hour, and are hosted by a rotating crew of New Statesman writers, including Anoush Shakelian, Rachel Cunliffe, and Tom McTague. It dives into the 1 or 2 biggest stories of the day, and is a great way to just stay up to date with politics. It does obviously present things normally through a slightly more left-wing lens, but like with Coffee House Shots, this is very high-quality journalism nonetheless. And one thing especially I often find it's really good at is its grasp on the more underreported left-wing. so out with the Labour Party. For example, it does great coverage of the Greens and has had some incredibly interesting reporting on your party. Next on the list is Political Currency. Political Currency is made by Persephonica, and it covers UK politics through an economic lens. It's hosted by former Chancellor George Osborne and former Shadow Chancellor Ed Balls. This is a really interesting setup because it's easy to criticize and do political commentary from the sidelines. But in Political Currency, there's an understanding of fiscal policy and its restraints that you don't see and often don't hear about in an honest way elsewhere. Episodes come out every Monday and Thursday and last about an hour. The Monday episodes follow a Q&A structure where listener questions are taken, and the Thursday episodes cover the week's political events. The show also occasionally does some excellent sort of special series using Balls's and Osborne's first-hand experience at the heart of politics. The Brexit plots, which they made alongside Michael Gove in April last year, are especially worth a listen. Then we've got Political Fix. Political Fix is the Financial Times' big political podcast. It's hosted by FT political editor George Parker and features other FT writers and reporters. This is maybe one of the drier entries on this list. Partially because there's no political superstar attached to it, and partially because it just follows the sort of weekly episode on the biggest news structure that others on this list follow as well. But the reason it's on this list is because of its flash and the fact that it always takes that slight step further into details than any other weekly podcast on this list does. For example, it focuses more on the big policy or the big international agreement of the week, rather than the parliamentary gossip of the day. It comes out every Friday with episodes lasting around 30 minutes. Next up is Politics at Sam and Anne's. Politics at Sam and Anne's is a co-production between Sky News and Politico. It's hosted by Sky News' Sam Coates and Politico's Anne McElvoy, and covers the day-to-day goings-ons at the top of UK politics. The podcast comes out Monday through Thursday, and every episode takes us inside the daily headlines of the day. What makes this podcast unique is just how in the know its two hosts very obviously are. The podcast is filled with internal gossip, but also quite deep analysis. This is also a podcast that gives you an understanding beyond just the biggest names you see on the TV all the time. You hear about high-ranking civil servants, about senior advisors, and junior ministers. The episodes can sometimes feel a little hectic and all over the place, but I personally quite enjoy that, to be honest. We've also then got Stormont Sources. Stormont Sources is another podcast from the same company, Shortbread Media, that brought you Holyrood Sources. Stormont Sources covers all things politics in Northern Ireland. It's hosted by journalist David McCann, former head of policy for the DUP, Tim Cairns, and the former special advisor for the SDLP, Michael McKernan. Much like its sister program, this is not something that's designed for people just getting into Northern Irish politics. This isn't a subject that I'm all that versed on myself, but over the past few months I've been listening to Stormont Sources, and I'm starting to pick up on it more. But let's just say there was quite a steep learning curve. Much like some other podcasts, this one takes the big political subject of the week and discusses them. The episodes are about 45 minutes to an hour and come out every Thursday. Now let's go to The Rest is Politics. The Rest is Politics is the podcast of all podcasts on UK politics, and you probably already listened to it. It's produced by podcast mega company Goalhanger. It's hosted by former Tony Blair spin doctor Alistair Campbell and Tory MP and leadership candidate Rory Stewart. Now, the analysis and coverage of the UK politics on here isn't all that interesting. Stewart was never a particularly talented political operator, and so he has quite questionable takes and predictions. At the same time, Campbell hasn't been in and around power for decades. But they're both people with their eyes on the rest of the world, Stewart especially, and so their coverage of British international relations are very, very strong and interesting. Though be aware, Campbell has some takes on President Trump that often veer over into tinfoil hat conspiracy theory craziness. Episodes are normally around 45 minutes and come out every Tuesday and Wednesday. And with that, we hop over to Walescast. Walescast is a BBC production on, you guessed it, Welsh politics. It's hosted by BBC journalist in Wales Felicity Evans and BBC Wales radio presenter James Williams. This show is terrific for people who don't know much about Welsh politics. It's very good at explaining from the beginning and introducing you to the characters of Welsh politics. It's structured less like a let's look at what happened this past week and a bit more topic-oriented, normally dealing with one main area per episode. If you're looking to start getting into Welsh politics ahead of the 2026 Senate election, I mean, there's no better place to start than here. And now for the very final podcast on this list, Westminster Insider. Earlier, I told you what my second favorite on this list was. Well, here's my favorite. Westminster Insider is a podcast produced by Politico. It is hosted by Sacha O'Sullivan or Patrick Baker. They each host every other week or so. What this podcast does that's so unique is that it takes a trend or a political hot potato or an aspect of the way the politics works and goes in depth with it with insider knowledge and interviews. For example, it recently did an episode on how state visits are organized and another one on political satire. So it's a lot less newsy and a lot more learny. And on top of that, the production quality is excellent and the caliber of experts that they get in incredibly impressive. I genuinely cannot say enough good stuff on this podcast, so go check it out. Episodes vary between 30 to 45 minutes and come out every Friday. And that's it. The 12 podcasts on the UK that I personally prefer to listen to. Are there any that you'd add to the list? Any less well-known ones that deserve more listeners? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, please give it a massive thumbs up and consider subscribing to my channel. Thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.